in this kitchen tutorial video, I'm going to be showing how to make homemade nut milk. The reason why you'd want to make homemade nut milk is because the nut milk you get at the grocery store, even if you can find a good quality organic one with no added sugar, it's still going to have some stabilizers added, things like carrageenan, sometimes some synthetic vitamins are added, and just other things that especially sensitive people might not tolerate well. And of course, having homemade nut milk is making it more of a pure whole food rather than something that's been sitting on a store shelf for weeks and has additives to stabilize its shelf life. So typically when I make nut milk, I'm either working with almonds or cashews, and I'm just kind of showing you, a brand that I work with. I order these off of Amazon, pretty good brand. Both of these are organic raw nuts. For the purposes of this video, we're going to be working with the cashews. So what I do is the day before I'm preparing to make some nut milk, I'm going to do the prep work. In a mason jar, this is a quart mason jar, I'll measure out a cup of the raw cashews and just put them at the bottom, and then I cover them with some filtered water so they cover the nuts. And a lot of times what works best is if you put it back in the refrigerator when you let it soak overnight. So what we're doing by soaking the nuts is activating them to release the phytates, which block the vitamin and mineral absorption in our body. So we're trying to get the nuts in their proper form before we ingest them. So these nuts have actually been soaked overnight. So what I'm going to do next is pull them out of the refrigerator, and then I'm going to go drain the water, and we're going to rinse the nuts. So I'm going to do that next. So over here at the sink, strain the nuts. Typically I'll kind of rinse the jar out, rinse the nuts a little bit, and they are good to go. Okay, so at my house I have a Vitamix, which is a high-speed blender, really great for making nut milk. You can do this in your own regular blender as well. This one just has an ultra-high speed, so it really purees things really well. So what I'm going to do is just kind of scrape the cashews into the Vitamix, like so. And then we've got 1 cup of cashews in here. Into this 1 cup, I'm going to add 4 cups of filtered water. So for that, I come over to my water filter here. My Vitamix has a measurement on the side, so the 4 cup mark is about up here. So we're going to go all the way up to 4. All right, there we are. Now, if this was something I was going to drink on its own, I might add a little bit of vanilla stevia to it. This is the liquid herb stevia with some vanilla flavoring, so it kind of gives it more of that vanilla almond milk flavor. I would put maybe just 2 to 3 drops tops in this entire container. A lot of times I'm using this in a smoothie, so I'm flavoring it with some other things, so I don't necessarily need the vanilla stevia. One thing I do tend to do though is just add a couple sprinkles of sea salt into the water with the cashews. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is actually blend it up and make the cashew milk. So put the top on, put it on the Vitamix. Usually I blend it on the low setting up to the highest speed on the low setting, and then I'll kind of crank it up to the high setting just to give it an extra kick. So here we go. So that's pretty fast. It probably took me about 30 to 45 seconds just to blend that up. Alright, so next what I'm going to do is make the cashew milk. So I actually just reused the same jar that I had the cashews in. I've rinsed it clean. The next tool that you're going to need for making nut milk is what's called a nut milk bag. And this is one that I ordered, again, online off Amazon. It's got a really fine mesh to it, which you can see, which you need to have to make sure that you keep all of the nut pulp in the bag and the liquid strain out. So to do this, I'll put it inside of my mason jar and kind of open it up like this. This is going to be my strainer bag. Then I take the cap off of my blender here, and then I go ahead and I start to pour the cashew milk into the nut milk bag. And this is kind of a you know, pour a little, milk it, pour a little, milk it type of process. So it's kind of close to the top. So typically what I do is I'll actually, with my other hand, kind of squeeze the bag, and it's literally milking the almond milk right through that mesh into the jar. And I do this in my sink because it can get messy, although once you start doing this over and over again, you get better at it. But you know, you definitely want to try to get as much as you can into the jar. Cashews are a really soft nut, so a lot of times there is not a lot of pulp, I find, when I'm doing this left in the bag, as opposed to almonds or coarser. There will tend to be a lot of pulp at the bottom of the bag if I'm doing almond milk, so it's just kind of one difference to know. And then I've got that pretty well squeezed out. Sometimes when it's close to emptying, you know, I'm close to the top of the jar, I'll kind of just open up the bag and just slow pour it through. Like so, kind of watching to make sure I'm not overflowing the jar. And that's everything pretty much in the blender. So the last part, you just kind of keep milking it. I try to kind of slowly work the bag out of the jar as I'm milking the cashew milk from the bag. And you know, some of it is going to leak out, but you just kind of do the best you can. And I'll try to center on sort of a corner of the bag to get the milk to go through. And most of the time it comes out pretty close to where I want it, as far as being close to the top of the jar, but not overflowing. Okay, so there's that. What I'll do next is I'll actually just put the lid right on it. Oops. Sometimes I'll give the outside of the mason jar a little rinse like that. Kind of wipe it clean with a cloth. And you've got your cashew milk. And so when you go to use this, the one thing you do want to do, because this is homemade cashew milk, at least what I like to do, is I'll take it out of the refrigerator, come over to the sink and kind of just shake it a little bit so that any pulp that's actually suspended in the liquid gets integrated back in, and then when you go to drink it or you're going to put it in your blender, you've got more of a well-constituted almond milk or cashew milk. And that is how you can make homemade nut milk.